everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Ramble on Woodworking. Today we're going to have some fun making some hybrid resin blanks. Nothing too complicated, but some of the techniques and some of the ideas that I use to make a nice pen blank. We'll start off by cutting up some different pieces of wood. I grabbed some maple burl, and step one is to put it on the bandsaw and cut it into lengths that will fit into the mold that I've made. Let's just say a little bit less than a ½ inch square or something close to that. Irregular is nice so that you get an irregular finish on the pen, so that you get different mixes of resin and burl. Here we're using a burl cap, and so you've got the irregular shape of the top that will look real nice when we turn that in a later episode. So I'm going to be making 4 blanks today, and so I'll cut up enough wood to make sure that we have plenty for today and for a few more down the road. In this case, I'm not just cutting them to length. I'll cut a few of these pieces into smaller pieces and mix them into the burl blank mold, into the pen blank mold, so that we get a variety of shapes and sizes and textures to mix with our resin, and that makes for a nice effect. Yeah, so all set there. There's our variety of pieces that we'll place into the mold, and the placement is random with a little bit of a plan. You'll see here that we mix some of the pieces together side by side, and other we'll just put a single piece inside the blank. That mold rather is made out of some silicone that I prefabricated out of a fiberboard mold. Fairly straightforward to make. It's a simple box with 4 pieces of fiberboard used to create the voids that we mix the silicone into. Maybe we'll do another one of those in a later episode. So there's the resin that we use, and I've selected a mixture of different types of dyes and mica powders. Those 2 right there are glow-in-the-dark types. We'll see how those go. And then the Pearl X. Links to all of these products can be found down below, of course. So after you fix the colors that you're going to use, it's time to mix up a batch of resin. This particular resin, which is available at most big box stores, is a 1-to-1 ratio here. I'm using a pre-measured cup and mixing it 4 parts to 4 parts. That's enough for my mold, plus a little bit left over. Always fun to take some leftover resin and cast it into some molds that you might have hanging around. Often we'll take those extra pieces of resin that have cured and incorporate them into pen blanks for a real neat pattern, and I did that in a previous video. So with this resin, the mixing requirement is about 4 to 6 minutes. It's a combination of the viscosity changing to something a little bit thinner, and certainly you want the resin to turn clear, and you want to do a good job of scraping all the edges, of course. I'm using a paint stick from the local big box store to mix it, half a stick actually. Always wear gloves, of course, and respiratory protection if you're not in a well-ventilated area. The fumes off of these types of resins can be harmful. So I'm doing my best to distribute the mixed resin into the 6 subcups so that we can mix up our colors. It always seems that one gets shortchanged a little bit, but that's okay. It's important with the mica type resins to mix well. You don't want them to clump together, and this particular brand of resin is good at that. It's also really important when you mix up pen blanks, of course, to get a blank that is as opaque as possible so that you can't see through it into the brass tube that you use to ultimately assemble the pen. One thing about those fluorescent pigments, they tend to leave a more, I say fluorescent, actually those are glow-in-the-dark types. They are more transparent than opaque. You could put the whole bottle in and it probably would not become opaque, but it makes for a nice effect within the other colors, and it's also cool sometimes to, of course, put it under a bright light and turn out the lights and your pen will have a glow to it. So now mixing all of the pigments into the resin. This also allows for the resin to start to thicken a bit. But this particular resin goes through a curing process that lasts about 15 to 20 minutes before it gets to the point where it's unworkable. And we're at about the 8-9 minute mark now. And so it's time to at least move quickly on pouring the blanks where it's the consistency of something like maple syrup. You don't want it real watery, otherwise the colors will blend together and it won't look as nice. As far as mixing goes, of course, it's totally up to you as to how you want to mix your colors together. Greens and blues always look nice. A little bit of white. You'll see at the end, that first mold there to my left comes out looking almost cloud-like with a little bit of the earth mixed in, and with the wood should make a real nice pen. You can see when I poured that pink color over the burl that it's easy to still see the burl, and so I'll mix it with a darker color to obscure the brass tube in the blank. You'll see also that ultimately I'll have some resin left over, and that's what those other molds for to the right, to my right, are. It's nice, like I said, to be able to pour any leftover resin into some molds that you might use for other things. Those are some handmade molds that we made, the purple, light purple colored ones that are of small turtles that we incorporate into other products that we make. And then the pink one is actually something that was purchased in a cake decorating store that will make some small roses, flower decorations. You can over pour these slightly, especially since they get thicker, and when you're done, if there's a curve to the back of those pores, you just sand it off with a fine sandpaper. So we just finish up pouring some of the extras, some of the different colors. The glow-in-the-dark resins by themselves are pretty neat when you show them the kids after they've been under a bright light. This is actually a mold that we use quite often to pour different types of coasters. We've made some real neat geode types in the past. This is actually a mold of a mold inside this coaster, in that there were some rings that we had made in a mold and didn't really have any idea what we could use them for. They didn't fit on anyone's wrist as a bracelet, and so we played around with that, and it should make for an interesting coaster. It's into the pressure pot at this point to eliminate all of the voids and air spaces. Nothing worse than turning a pen and having it start to chip out because it's got a bunch of air bubbles trapped in it. So this pressure pot, which is, I guess when it was made originally, it's for the painting industry, but with a simple modification, works real well for people like us that work with a lot of resin. So we'll hook it up to the compressor and get it up to about 50 psi, and we'll leave it in the pot for 24 hours, and there we are. And this is the fun part where we get to take our mold and see how everything turned out. And I'm looking forward to turning these in the near future to make some real interesting pens. So I hope you like this video. If you have any ideas for other videos that you'd like to see, other objects that we can turn in resin and to use to make pens or other things, we would love to hear from you. And if you could subscribe and hit that like button, and we would really appreciate it. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you again real soon.